Today's webinar is titled How to Turn Your Managers into Talent Magnets. Thank you for attending today. At first, we'll cover a few housekeeping items. We record all of our webinars, so at the conclusion of this webinar, we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording, should you want to listen to it in the future or pass it along to others. We will also be using the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you'd like to enter questions throughout the presentation, you're welcome to do so. We will be answering them as we move through the presentation as opposed to holding everything till the end. So feel free to take advantage of that opportunity. And now I will introduce our speaker for today.
Is that my cue to start talking, Susie, or were you going to say something about
it? It is, yeah. I was hoping I could see your slides.
I'm going to introduce you first, frankly.
Okay.
No, I'm going to introduce you first. This is my co-presenter, Susie Alligood, who has been with Xenium HR since there was a Xenium HR. And she's got an enormous amount of experience in the HR field and in training and development. And that's why I was so grateful to have her express interest in this material. Her good opinion means a lot to me. She currently directs training and development programs for all of Xenium.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, and I will be moderating today's webinar, so I will be passing most of the speaking off to Tom. However, I will be monitoring the chat and will be answering questions or addressing questions along the way. So with that, I'll let you get started, Tom.
Super. And this is a life-size photo of me. I'm Tom Cox, and I've been studying this, the issues around leadership and, in particular, turnover for quite some time. And this past spring, I finally got a clear understanding of the interplay between the elements that make up what it means to keep somebody around for the right reasons. And I'm going to share that with you here today. And I'd like to get a sense of the folks here on the call. The top reasons for voluntary turnover in your organization and in your experience. Why have you left voluntarily, or why have people around you left voluntarily? Whatever you think the top reason is, either in your organization or maybe you think actually a lot of you guys are pretty well read and know the industry figures as well. What are the top reasons for turnover? And we'll let those trickle in and we'll collect them and share some of those responses. And some of the answers have been higher pay elsewhere, lack of a strong manager, no one's interested in their career, and so forth. I'm going to share with you the industry answers. And the most typical answer is career advancement or promotion opportunity elsewhere. Far and away the number one by 32%. This is from Gallup, and these are industry-wide. Secondarily, however, is pay and benefits, then a lack of fit to the job, then obviously the quality of your manager and your work environment. Now, I'd like to have you ponder, of these, which ones do you as a boss have some influence over when it comes to keeping the best people with you or attracting even more? And as you contemplate this, if you think of yourself as a disempowered manager, you might think, well, just that 17%, that's all I can handle. That's all I can really affect. And what I'm going to show you here in the next 30 minutes is that you, in fact, have direct influence over three of these: career advancement and promotion opportunity. The manager has control or high influence over the level of fit to the job, and direct and I think personal responsibility for management and work environment, and furthermore significant influence over pay, benefits, and flexibility in scheduling. Which means that the quality of your leadership and the quality of your management, you that direct manager, you are the reason people are leaving if they're leaving voluntarily. People join organizations and leave bosses, either directly or indirectly. And there's got to be a way to turn that around, and I know that there is. So this is my favorite question to ask a group like this, and that question is, who was your best boss ever? It could be the first name, could be the full name, could be the initials. Just type in the name. Who's the best boss you ever had? Could be a teacher, could be a coach. Often, especially if you've been in the business world for a while, it'll have been a boss. And by the way, we're not reporting your responses to your current boss. And if you'd rather just use initials, totally fine. And what's interesting to me is that when I ask this question, people know instantly who it is. There's never hesitation. There's never, I'm not sure. Sometimes there's a choice of two really good ones, but there's no bafflement unless you've never had a good boss, in which case I'm really, really sad for you. So enter your answer of who your best boss was. And I don't think it's fair for me to pick on Susie and ask her to chime in on hers, but I am going to ask Susie to answer this next question coming up.
Sure.
So heads up to Susie. So people are responding pretty quickly at who their best boss was. Now here's the next question. And the next question is, okay, what did that person say or do to make them be the best boss as opposed to somebody else? What was it about them that made them different from your second best boss, let's say, let alone your worst boss? And take a minute and ponder that, because this strikes to the heart of today's webinar. What does it mean for someone to have been your best boss? And as you're pondering that, sometimes you're running through 3 or 4 things. It could have been, well, I like this and I like that. Or you're thinking, well, how do I put it into words? I know the feeling I had working for that person, but putting it into words sometimes is a challenge. Some of the responses already coming in are empowered decision making and caring and understanding and heartfelt positive feedback and clear expectations, feedback on the deliverables, set clear expectations, a good communicator.
Yeah, communication comes up a lot.
Oh, yeah. And Susie, when I know I hit you with this one a while ago, and I'm wondering if your answer has changed as you've thought about it more. When you think of your best boss, what was the behavior or the interactions that you were having with that person that made them better than anybody else for you?
Yeah, actually it's fairly easy for me to answer this. It's someone, the individual, took the time to get to know me and my talents and my strengths and what motivates me, which, you know, it varies by individual, and allowed me the freedom to be able to leverage my strengths and abilities, which to me, the ability to be creative and independent is important. And so she sees that need in me, and she structures my job and, you know, manages me according to those strengths and weaknesses.
So taking the time to get to know you, knowing your true strengths and your abilities, and giving you the freedom to express those strengths, and probably challenged you and probably gave you maybe a little more freedom than you were always necessarily fully comfortable with.
Sure.
And saying, oh, you're ready for this, Susie, and you're thinking, I'm not ready for this. And you got to get it anyway. I want to run through the other answers we got from our audience. How she made us all feel was one. Thank you, Carla. Listened attentively, highly approachable, committed to my education and advancement. Thank you, Matt. Addressed my need to balance family and work and the flexibility to do that. Sensitive to my needs, on and on. And none of this should be a surprise to any of us. What's surprising and sort of sad and shocking is how rarely it happens and how it's not the common thing. It's actually a little uncommon. That's why we remember that so fondly. Here's my next question. What impact did this best boss have on you? Take a second here. Ponder that. So she empowered you, or she gave you freedom, or was a good communicator. What was the impact on you of that? Take your time and think of your response to that. And so, Jed, thank you for sharing. Wanted to go above and beyond in my daily work. Yeah, this desire to really give your all. That's very common. One for Tanguy, the personal and professional growth was the impact. She could get me to happily do any project she needed me for, says Carla. Thank you, Carla. Kept me excited in my career path. Thank you, Carrie Ann. High approachability led to fast conflict resolution. Pfft, of course it does. Thank you, Ben. So you get this idea that high-performance team working for this best boss. Professional growth was the springboard to my current position. Solicited my advice and acted upon it, which I imagine, John, made you feel awesome. So as we're running through these impacts, we're thinking, man, that's the kind of team I want to work on. Wouldn't it be cool if all of us had bosses like this throughout our careers? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could get all the managers around us to do this for all of their people? So by the way, this has been asked tens of thousands of times, and here are the most common answers that others give. Mentored me, coached me, believed in me, empowered me, trusted me, valued me, cared about me as a person. Susan Steinbrecher has asked this set of questions to audiences for decades now. I've been asking it to hundreds upon hundreds of people, and I get the same answer she got. Now here's where it gets really kind of spooky, is that while it seems like a grab bag of answers, in fact, it all boils down to just these two things. If we were to sum it up, there's two buckets of answers. Kept me safe and made me grow. Kept me safe and made me grow. Almost nothing anybody ever says in response to this couldn't be categorized as one or the other or both of these two things. Now, of course, what keeps one person feeling emotionally safe on the job could be very different from what another person would need, which is why a really good manager is going to adapt themselves differently to each person working for them. Nevertheless, this realization that all these answers fell into these two buckets was the turning point for me understanding how to turn a manager into a talent magnet. And here's my next question for you. If your best boss were hiring, number one, would you be interested? Number two, even if it wasn't a position you could take, would you tell your friends about it? Hey, there's an opening working for this amazing person. And three, would you only refer the best people that you knew? Or would you, if someone were probably not going to be a very good fit, but you wanted to do that person a favor, would you refer that marginal candidate? And I'd be curious what people say. And folks are saying yes to all three. That's one response. Anybody else care to weigh in? I'd love to hear some other responses. Yes, yes, and yes. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Tang. Is it Tanguy? Not the first one, but yes to the others. In fact, have done this several times, says Janelle. Hey, Janelle. And so you can see that your best boss, even though you don't work for that person anymore necessarily, is still exerting this talent pull on you, that you would love to go work there if you could, if it was a fit to your career. You would totally let your friends know, and you'd only refer the best. Oh my gosh. So you can see how this all connects, that if only we could get a particular manager to provide that best boss experience that you had, that manager would become the kind of talent magnet that your best boss is for you. How do we do that? That's been the focus of my study for many years now. I'm going to share with you what I've learned. And the question I was asking myself is, what are the skills that make a best boss the best boss you've ever had? What do they have to be, as well as what do they have to do to create that experience, that subjective experience of excitement and engagement? And I would walk through fire for that person. What do they need? And I've boiled it down to 4 major sections, which I'm going to share with you here. First of all is to know thyself. A good manager knows themselves at a mechanical or mechanistic level. Let me describe what I mean. Knowing their own true strengths and weaknesses, knowing if you are a reader or a listener, knowing if you learn by talking or writing or drawing or doing or thinking, being well organized, and total ninja talent, hardly anyone does this, is very, very powerful, keeping a feedback analysis journal. Now, I only have time to fly through these quickly, but I really want to reinforce how astonished I was when I first realized that what Peter Drucker wrote about this in 1999 in one of his most famous long articles called On Managing Oneself. And he said that most people don't stop to ask, am I a reader or a listener? They don't ask themselves that. And then even if they do identify it, they don't then do anything with that information. And as I was reading this article, I was thinking, well, yeah, but I'm smarter than that. And then I thought, well, am I? And I realized I was doing the same thing. I hadn't bothered to notice I'm totally a reader. I can listen, but it's not my preferred mode. If I read something, I retain it. I get it quicker, I understand it more deeply, and I retain it longer than if I have to listen to it. If you give it to me by talking at me and I can't take notes, after about 5 minutes, my head is full. Let's see. Oh, and we have an issue with sound. Somebody has lost their sound. Has anybody else got issues with sound? Okay. Very good.
Okay, we'll follow up here.
So the sense of knowing your own strengths and weaknesses and knowing your own style, it's this easy victory. You know, I share sharing this with people, some of my clients, and I said, are you a reader or listener? One guy, he's the CEO of a company of 700 people and used to really hate all the emails that would fly around and people would try to resolve things with him in email. He sends very terse emails. And if you ever get like a 2-sentence email from the boss, you can infer a lot of negative emotional vibe in that short little terse bitten off. Well, he's a listener and a talker. Those are his primary modes. He said that he started taking on his 1-hour morning walk, he'd take his phone with him and just leave people voicemails. And by the end of his 1 hour, and he's going to take that walk anyway, his head was clear, he'd thought through all of his issues, he talked it out on the voicemails, people could hear his tone of voice, and he was giving her messages. And as a result, he saved himself 2 to 3 hours of daily email with 1 hour of voicemails just by knowing he was a listener talker. I'm a reader writer and I do a lot of drawing. I work very closely with the listener talker. When she starts talking, after 5 minutes, my brain's full. My brain is full. I don't have any more room. And offload it from my head, or I either start writing things down or I don't get it. If you've got a manager who's taking over a group that used to be managed by a reader, that manager probably taught everybody to send memos. Give me a written update. And that person's totally on top of it. The next manager to take over the group might be a listener. And they're getting all these memos. They don't read them as deeply or as fluidly or as easily with as low effort as the reader does. So you can see how your effectiveness can dramatically change based on whether you notice this about yourself and then take advantage of the you that you are. And I want to emphasize this is a purely mechanistic level. The victories you get at this level not only boost your productivity significantly if you have drifted off from your true nature, equally importantly, they're effectively free. You don't have to grow particularly. One exception is GTD, the Getting Things Done methodology by David Allen. I highly recommend that. That is my standard that I encourage all my clients to adopt. And if we had more time, we'd get back into feedback analysis in detail. Let's just say that that is the process that helped Peter Drucker become one of the most famous, well-known, respected, brilliant thinkers on management of all time. And it's a technique that truly top performers do. It's about writing down your decisions at the time you make them, and then when you discover what actually happened, going back and examining not your memory of what your decision was about, but what you're actually, at the time you decided what you were thinking, in being able to understand your own deciding nature and learn to make better decisions and discover, by the way, your own self-defeating patterns as you are making them. It is a spooky, powerful technique. So that's the first of the 4 layers of becoming a best boss, is know thyself. It's one of the things that I teach. Number 2 is to grow thyself. And by that I'm referring very specifically to emotional maturity. Most of the research on this since 1983, when emotional intelligence was surfaced as one of the multiple intelligences, and especially since about 95, when Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, came out and was popularized and became a subject of study. It hasn't been that long since that occurred, what, 20 years or so. And what we've discovered is that the top executives, 90% of the difference between a top executive and an average executive is their level of emotional maturity. Now, if we were to think about the best boss you identified when I asked you about who your best boss was, if you were to think about it, I would doubt very much if you would tell me that your best boss was a screamer, or flew off the handle easily, or didn't even know his own emotions or her own emotions, or handled them very poorly, or lacked empathy, or had poor social skills, or zero motivation. I doubt that any of those things would be true of your best boss. Maybe one was marginal. But the vast majority of people who get identified as a best boss have 3 or 4 of these, somewhere between middling to strong. Now, I happen to be particularly keen on this level of the best boss system as a talent magnet tool, because people love working for a boss who's got this level of emotional maturity. They love the way they make the people around them feel safe. They love the way that an emotionally mature person doesn't have to control other people in order to feel in control. And this emotional maturity allows a leader, a manager, a boss to treat problems as learning opportunities, even when they're real problems. To create a bubble of calm where you can bring them bad news and they're okay with it. And the difference between this and what most of us do most of the time is quite stark. And I will hold myself up as an example. Even 10 years ago, my emotional maturity was well below average. I was a boss in 2002, and this is actually what got me started on becoming so fascinated with this area of how to be a best boss. I was kind of thrown in my face that I was not good at all. And it made me mad because I wanted to be really good. And I've been really good at a lot of things in my life. And somehow it wasn't clear how one can be good at being a boss. It wasn't about learning. It wasn't about the reading. It wasn't about the it wasn't about not having the book learning. I had all that, and yet I wasn't good. And it became clear to me that this was the area where I had to grow. And it turns out that emotional intelligence, thank goodness, is the most growable of all of the multiple intelligences there is. Of all of them, emotional intelligence is the easiest to grow dramatically, even from a very low base. So if you've got a manager somewhere in your organization or somewhere close to you who has low emotional maturity, they can change if they want to. And that to me is a very exciting discovery. Now that's the grow thyself, that green layer. Next is inspiring loyalty. Now these are techniques that you probably read about online. There's a lot of internet tips on, oh yes, here are tips for building relationship with your staff. And we probably, many of us here on the call, have taught some of these or practiced some of them. And they don't work terribly well in the hands of an emotionally immature boss. They only work well in the hands of a emotionally mature boss, which is why these top two levels, first and second level, are so foundational, so important. And inspiring loyalty, for me, refers very specifically to taking a genuine interest in other people. Now, you saw this in the responses that we shared with each other earlier on when I said, so what was his boss? Your personal best boss, what was that person like? And you can actually quiz people on this if you wanted to. If you, let's say you're an HR or an OD professional and you want to check the loyalty level that a person's likely to have from their staff, you don't have to ask the staff awkward questions. You can go to the manager and say, so here's a list of all your staff members. Do you know their kids' names? And the ones that don't are flunking level 3. Do you know for each staff member what their individual career goal is? Do you know what their motivators are? Do you know their work style? In other words, are they, each of your staff members who report to you, a listener or a reader? Are they a talker or a writer? Or do they need to think silently? If you know these things about your staff, you at least have the knowledge to lead them well and start to inspire loyalty in them. If you lack that knowledge, you haven't taken the time to look. How do you work with somebody for a year and not know their kids' names? Well, it was easy for me 10 years ago because I wasn't interested. And I never asked, and if they offered the information, I didn't hold on to it. I was terrible. And it was when I realized that taking a real interest, a genuine interest in others, was crucial to my effectiveness in working with them. That was when I turned it around and said, I either need to find it in me to be interested in others, or I need to stop managing. Now there's a fourth level, and I've had a lot of pushback on the name. I call it demanding excellence. And I want to mention in passing that levels 3 and 4, loyalty and excellence, were inspired very, very heavily by an awesome book called The 2R Manager. I'll include a link to that and a reference to it in the email that you'll all get at the end of the webinar. And to demand excellence really is to be willing to get in someone's face if they give you quality that you know they can exceed. If they're underperforming their own abilities, do you stop them in their tracks and say, dude, I know you can do better than this? Or, for that matter, you've got some standard for the client, and you can say, I'm sorry, this is below the standard we need to be giving to our client. You can't turn this into me. A lot of folks who are good at layer 3 are actually dreadful at level 4. If it's in their sweet spot to get along well with staff, they're still not going to be a talent magnet just by having their kids' names and having an interest in them as people if they don't also push them out of their comfort zone, hold them to high standards, and so forth. And you know this from your own experience. The responses we got at the beginning of this webinar prove that. Here are some examples. This is just a subset of what it means to demand excellence. Part of it is having the courage to confront. Do you confront misbehavior immediately? You know, the Oregon Business Magazine does a best places to work assessment every year. And the number one positive reason why people like their company, and there's a lot of reasons, but the one that eked out the others for the first was having a vision, a mission that they believed in. That was exciting. And the number one avoidable thing that brought people down was having a boss who refused to confront misbehavior. Now, I'm going to ask the audience here real quickly, and Susie, you can chime in with me as well. Have a look at your own history, your own memories, and ask yourself, have I been in an environment where people didn't confront misbehavior quickly, and what was the effect on me? And Susie, if I asked you that, what would you tell them?
Well, it's demotivating if you're someone who is a conscientious high achiever. You know, if you're going above and beyond, and you're seeing that others are getting away with doing little, right? And there's no accountability. I would say that's a big demotivator for people.
Yeah, and in fact, it showed up truly as the number one demotivator in the Oregon Business Magazine poll from 2014. Having a manager that doesn't confront misbehavior right away. And yet the people who tend to be very, very naturally good at that third level of the best boss model that I've been sharing with you, that loyalty relationship level, a lot of them hold themselves back from greatness by wanting the relationship so much that they're afraid to risk that emotional capital and have a tough conversation and challenge somebody or get in their face. Mark just shared something in the Q&A. Thank you, Mark. The effect creates an environment of non-accountability, and it removes confidence in leaders. I could not say it better myself. Thank you, Mark. Some of you have seen this in others. Some of you may have even been this person yourself who's a little bit reluctant to confront. And Jed types in yes to Mark. Thank you, Jed, for the shout-out. The need to confront bad behavior belongs to the boss. Nobody else can do that. In some high-performance teams, teammates can, but it better be a strong cultural norm to be allowed to do that, or else the person who's complaining could be ostracized. You'll sometimes find that a dysfunctional team is one where people are colluding rather than conspiring. They're colluding to maintain low standards. And if you don't call me out on my misbehavior, I won't call you out on yours. And the only person who can really break that kind of a logjam is the leader, is the boss. Conversely, if the boss allows misbehavior to slide, it normalizes that bad behavior, makes it okay. It's very, very tempting to let high performers slide, and you can't. You are not a talent magnet when you do that. Another one is setting clear expectations. That came up in the Q&A at the very beginning when I asked you, what did you love about the best boss you ever had? Several people said, set very clear expectations, because if the expectations are clear, I know what I have to do to win. You may have to demand rework when rework is needed. That can make people uncomfortable. You have to be able to push through that. And I do teach people how to do that. There are techniques for learning how to achieve this level of courage if you don't already have it. And most importantly, for being a best boss and being a talent magnet, do you push staff out of their comfort zone when you know they can perform, even when they don't? I know you're ready for this, you might say. And because you've got the relationship, because they know in their bones that you've got their best interests at heart, they will allow themselves to be pushed by you. And then they will have the terrifying exhilaration of wondering if it's going to work. And then it works, and they're exhilarated and thrilled, and oh my God, I did have it in me. And, you know, Tom believed in me. And having that boss who believes in you and pushes you and cares about you as a person, that is an unbeatable combination. And it all can be learned. And these 4 steps are the 4 steps right there. Knowing yourself as a boss, growing yourself emotionally, learning the simple techniques to inspire loyalty, and having the language for accountability, the practice at demanding excellence. By the way, the number 1 practice for inspiring loyalty, the one I recommend more than any other, and again, this will also be, it'll be in the recording, and I'll make sure to include a link to it, is having a regular scheduled one-on-one meeting for at least 20 minutes with each person who reports to you every single week. Every 2 weeks if you have to push it out that far, but every week is far better. And when people say, oh, I don't have the time for that, the reality is when you make that time for those one-on-one meetings, your staff will start to perform at a higher level, and they will free up your time by being better performers. So the time you invest in that blue layer, that loyalty layer, is more than pays back.
Tom,
time freed up by your ability to give them higher levels of work. Go ahead, yes, Susan.
I'm sorry to butt in, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. But one thing I find with talking to various managers is that
yes,
they're often supervising like 15 or more people.
Sure.
And so,
if you had 20 people, that would be 10 hours a week. That would be a lot.
Yeah.
So you drop it to 20 minutes, and you might have to cut it to every 2 weeks. I totally get that.
Yeah.
And If you are supervising, let's say you're supervising 20 people, which is a big load, what is the most important thing in your existence as a manager? Isn't it to make them effective?
Sure.
Okay. In that case, your number one activity is getting to understand them. And in those one-on-one meetings, they're very structured meetings, by the way I teach it. I use a variant of the manager tools technique, which is the first 10 minutes of the 30 minutes that I use. The first 10 minutes is them, their agenda. I say prepare an agenda. The first 10 minutes is yours. Sometimes they take 20. I'm okay with that. Second 10 minutes is my agenda for them, the project you're working on, the roadblocks you're hitting, new stuff that's coming down the pike, things that don't belong in a staff meeting that need to be shared one-on-one, including both positive and negative feedback. And the last 10 minutes is always about their career, their growth, their long-term prospects, how they're developing themselves. And when you do that week after week for 12, 13, 14 weeks, your relationship with your staff changes so completely that you will never, ever go back. And it's a testament to the power of the structured one-on-one that everyone I've ever persuaded to try it for more than a few weeks has never, ever stopped. So is it an investment of time? Yes, it is. It's an investment in relationship with your people. It is your primary layer 3 activity in the Best Boss model. And if you don't want to be a talent magnet, don't do it. If you do want to be a talent magnet, I urge you to try it and find out. In fact, you can just do it with your top people. To pick out your top 5 people. Say we're running an experiment. I'm experimenting on the top people because they can take it if I screw it up. And you'll quickly discover that everyone else is hungry for it too. And that the difference it makes in your relationship with them and their productivity and your ability to delegate portions of your job to them will skyrocket. So I will champion this. I've got experience on my side on this one. I'm highly confident that I am accurate. Q&A time. Susie, are there questions coming in, if any? And I know that I've spoken a great deal. I've probably answered every possible question.
Yeah, so I would invite people to enter questions if they have them. I do have some here coming in, so let's see here.
Great.
We work for a small company, and defining accountability is actually difficult. We don't really have a good set of, or what, it says, responses to confronting misbehavior. Yeah, okay, I get it. Consequences, so to speak. What's going to happen if you don't meet expectations around performance and behavior. So how do you create accountability in a small company without a formal performance review or HR program?
Right. You have to start with yourself. The good news is it's always easy to start with yourself because you've got more control over you than probably anybody else, not counting your spouse. And so the way I would tackle that is I would say, who has the biggest performance challenge? And if it's me, or I need to lead by example anyway, I would start by meeting with my folks one-on-one, making sure I have a relationship with them. And when they aren't hitting a particular performance target, or they're not doing a particular thing they said they would do, I would say, dude, what happened? And I would listen closely to their answer, and then I would share with them the impact that their non-performance had. By the way, one of the drivers of low performance is typically very, very low precision communication. You remember at the beginning of the webinar we talked about the importance of setting clear expectations. Low performance organizations tend to thrive in fog. I know because I've generated my own share of fog over the years when I was afraid of accountability. And clarifying who is going to do what by when with really crisp language is vital, and it's hard, especially when you first do it, because people who are used to low accountability and you start to introduce high accountability, they get really nervous. And that's why you've got to have that good relationship with them. They're not afraid of being thrown under the bus. And you need to start with yourself and say, hey guys, I want you to hold me accountable. And I've got a book I recommend by Henry Evans on the language of accountability. It's the one that I teach from.
Great. We're getting a couple more questions. We do have time for one more, and then what I think I'll do is I'll capture the questions and perhaps, Tom, you could even follow up directly, or when we send out the recording and the slides, we can provide contact information. Because there's some good ones here. I think for the last one, given the time.
Quickly. Yeah, you cannot get your boss to do one-on-ones with you. You can offer your boss a professional update that's 15 minutes long and sort of start the ball. You cannot make your boss do a one-on-one with you. Don't even try. My source for one-on-ones, the structure that I use, it is supported by both a PDF and a set of podcasts. It's put out by Manager Tools, manager-tools.com. They are my go-to source for all of the basic blocking and tackling of management, and they will be, I will make sure to include the link to the one-on-one detailed information. Yes, the feedback analysis journal is the last remaining question, and if we had time, I would go into that in glorious detail. It's one of my favorites. I think that needs to be an article that I'll send along to folks as a follow-up.
Great. So we are at 10:46, so I'm sensitive to time here. A lot of great information. Thank you, Tom. And I apologize for not giving you a proper introduction at the beginning of the webinar. We had a unexpected fire drill here at 10 a.m., yes, which threw us off a little bit. So I do want to make sure to say that, Tom Cox has over 20 years experience consulting, practicing, studying, and teaching basic and advanced leadership skills. He's worked with firms such as IBM, The Standard, Oracle. He's authored over 290 leadership articles and hosted over 130 podcasts on leadership. So he's very familiar with this topic and does one-on-one consulting with leaders and business owners to help them be better leaders and talent magnets. So we will make sure.
And here's my handsome face. And,
yeah.
And thank you also very, very much for being a part of this. I appreciate the fact that others care as much as I do about the incredible importance of creating an environment where people are happy and fulfilled at work in the way that you are when you're working for the best boss you've ever had. I think every manager deserves a shot to be that boss. I think every worker deserves to have that boss. And it's my mission in life to make that happen.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And we will be following up the next day with the slides, recording, and additional information so they can contact you.
Super. I'll sign off while you close.
Thanks.